why people don't trust the Gospel Coalition, because they push a social gospel. So they're pushing a social gospel. Here's an article along those lines. There could have been many that we put up here, but I figured this one would be probably one of the best ones. This is by Paul David Tripp, My Confession Toward a More Balanced Gospel, April 9th, 2000, I think, is that 19 or 18? I think that's 2019. And this is what it says. It says, "For all my passion for the gospel of Jesus Christ, which has been accurate and faithful to the best of my ability, the gospel that I have held so dear has been in reality a truncated and incomplete gospel." So this author, who I had to read many of his books in seminary, now, after years of writing these helpful, according to many, I never actually, I hate to say it, I never actually thought they were that helpful. Sorry, Southeastern. Sorry, Master's Seminary. I know I was assigned these books. I never thought they were that helpful, but a lot of people do. And he wrote all these helpful books, and he's saying, after all this time, he said, "Look, I didn't have the whole gospel here. I had a truncated one, an incomplete gospel." He says, "By God's grace, I have become deeply persuaded that we cannot celebrate the gospel of God's grace without being a committed ambassador of the gospel of his justice as well." So wait a minute. There's a gospel of his grace, and then there's the gospel of his justice. There's two gospels? What does this mean? And he says this, "By God's patient grace, I am now convinced that I cannot be a voice for one without being a voice for the other. Sadly, I have preached grace and been silent in the face of injustice. The cross forbids me to close my eyes to any form of injustice, whether personal, corporate, governmental, ecclesiastical, or systemic." What about you? How balanced has your gospel been? Have you been an advocate for grace, but silent in the face of injustice? Have you been comfortable with the segregation of the Christian community, or with subtle personal prejudice? Where is God calling you to confession, repentance, and brand new ways of living? And if you read the entire article, you'll see that it's very much in line with the BLM kind of narrative. And he explains the awakening he had when he went to Eric Mason's church, the author of Woke Church, and started finding out his gospel was incomplete because he just wasn't aware of, and he hadn't been putting his efforts behind these efforts at creating a more equal society and getting rid of disparities and that kind of thing. So if you don't do that, then you are somehow failing to have a complete gospel. Now, of course, the gospel is the power of God for those who are actually Christians who have repented and put their faith in Jesus, but it is the power of God to salvation to those who believe. And the believing is it's the mechanism by which Christ's work, his finished work, is applied to us. So yes, there is repentance in that belief, but the belief is a trust in another's work. And so the gospel has always been, if you read the book of Galatians, I think it's very crystal clear, the gospel is the work of Christ. Another gospel would be merging man's works with Christ's work, and you can't do that. And so that's what we have here with Paul Tripp. And I've gone to great lengths, especially in my book, Christianity and Social Justice, Religions and Conflict, to explain that and to parse out the difference between this gospel that's being pushed and the true gospel that we see in the New Testament. So there are many other articles like this, but this is one of the best, in my opinion, clearest examples of how the Gospel Coalition, calling themselves the Gospel Coalition, right, is pushing sometimes a false gospel, another gospel, a gospel that needs to be anathematized. And this gospel of justice, whatever this is, that includes man's works, is that.